Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Research Transparency Campaign and this special session on how to publish open access at Erasmus University Rotterdam. As part of the Open Science Initiative, this campaign intends to bring awareness of pre-registration and other open research practices necessary to ensure transparency in the research workflow. The campaign is a collaboration between the Erasmus Research Institute of Management, ERIM, Erasmus University Library, and Erasmus Research Services. My name is Mutaleni Nadimi. I'm a project manager at the University Library's Data and Publications Services Department. Together with Dr. Antonio Schettino, the Open Science Coordinator at Erasmus Research Services, and Dr. Lisette Guzman Ramirez, Data Steward for the Erasmus School of Economics and the Rotterdam School of Management at ERIM, it's my pleasure to host you at today's session with a spotlight on open access publishing. Before we begin, we'd like to encourage you to consider joining the Open Science Community Rotterdam, where researchers and support staff help each other in learning, discussing, and adopting open science practices. For more information, check out the link to the website in the chat. We welcome you to use a chat to put your questions in, as after the presentation we'll have a Q&A. You can also ask a question by using the raise hand button at the end of the presentation and speaking directly to our presenter. Speaking of whom, we are delighted to be joined today by Dr. Eva Irani. Eva is a faculty liaison librarian serving both ESHPM and ESSB in the disciplines Health Policy and Management, Pedagogical Sciences, and Sociology. Together with the Open Access Officer, Joy Dijksman, Eva is a member of the Open Access team at the Erasmus University Library. Eva, thank you so much for being a part of this campaign. We're excited to hear what you have to share, so please take it away.
Thank you for that introduction, Mutaleni. I will go ahead and start. As I was telling the folks who were here earlier, for me, the hardest part is always getting the slides to share. No idea, even if I practiced it before, that's the case. And in the meantime, I can also give you another disclaimer that I am quite sick today. So if my brain is foggy for a second, then please bear with me. Well, with that out of the way, I am very excited to talk to you about open access today. And Mutaleni already introduced the open access team, but it would be remiss if I didn't mention us again. So I'm Eva, and of course in our team, our very small team, we also have Joy Dijksman, our open access officer. We both work at the University Library, and if you were to contact us at the open access email, which I encourage you to do if you have any questions after today or at any point in the future, then you will hear from either of us. And we're always happy to help and answer any questions about open access. So I wanted to, I think I missed a slide. So in the spirit of today's research transparency campaign, I did want to take open access and place it in the greater context of open science, because it's important to remember that while open access is an important part of open science, it is a part of it. And we also have open data, open educational resources, a number of things that have been touched upon in this research transparency campaign. But of course, the star of today's show is open access. But what do we mean when we say open access? Well, let us start with a working definition, that open access is free and open online access to publications. Now that is a great starting point, that what we mean by open access is if there is no barrier to accessing a publication. And those barriers can be either financial, legal, or technical in nature. So not just the financial aspect that we're familiar with, but also other types of barriers. And when we talk about open access, it's good to remember that this is in contrast to your traditional subscription models, where if you wanted to access information, you would need to pay a subscription fee as an institution or as a user. Now here at the University Library, for instance, we subscribe to a number of subscription journals, just to give some examples, and so that we can make these journals and the content within them available to our users. So to the academic community, which is everyone here. And we're very happy to do that. But when you're talking about open access, as I mentioned, that maybe this first bullet about accessing the document is just a starting point, because as a researcher, you also want people to be able to reuse your work and adapt it. So we're also talking about reusability when we talk about open access. So anyone can then read, download, copy, distribute your work, use it in an educational context, or other ways specified within legal agreements. Now, I'm sure every one of you here already knows at least some of the benefits of open access, but I did want to mention a few just to set the tone for today. So open access is associated with bridging the gaps between science and innovation. Now, think of how many people outside of the immediate academic community can benefit from your work as a researcher. I'm talking about those not directly involved, but those like school teachers, policy makers and advisors, or medical professionals who would also benefit from access to your research. Open access also helps fight misinformation, foster scientific collaboration, it can help allow your work to be used immediately in teaching. And if you're always looking for a selfish personal motivation to publish open access, I like to mention that if your work is available open access, then more people will read it. It will lead to more citations and more impact. And I'm not saying that you should care too much about your citation count, but if you were looking for a little bit of a selfish motivation, then there you have it. Okay, so with that said, I wanted to talk a little bit about the different types of open access. And then I will go into how you can actually go about publishing open access at the university and what your options are. So first, let us talk about gold open access. There are two types of gold open access, and we can start with what is known as pure gold open access, which is when you publish your work in a journal that is fully open access, which means that every single article in this journal is available open access. Now, when you're publishing in a fully open access journal, the version of your publication that will be made open access is the final version, the version of record, also known as the publisher's version. It's a bit of terminology. And that's because the journal itself contains open access articles. Now, typically, when you're publishing pure gold open access, you will have article processing charges associated with it. Sometimes these article processing charges are also known as author processing charges, and that speaks directly to the point that you as the author may have to pay to make your article available gold open access in a fully open access journal. Now, you also have journals that are subscription journals that support open access. So these are known as hybrid journals. In these journals, you can also choose to make your article available gold open access. It is still the publisher's version of record, or the final version that gets made available gold open access. And because of that, there are often likely article processing charges associated with that. Now we also have the option for you to publish green open access. Excuse me. When we talk about green open access, it means that your work has been published closed access in a journal, but then you can choose to self-archive your work so that it is available in an institutional repository, for instance, or in any other appropriate venue. So our institutional repository is Pure. You can choose to self-archive your work in Pure. When you self-archive, typically you have to follow certain publisher guidelines. And there you may be asked to make a certain version of your work available. And that's oftentimes not the publisher's version or the final version, but something that is called a postprint or an author-accepted manuscript. And that is the version of your work that has undergone peer review, so peer review check, but it does not have the typesetting or the formatting from the publisher. So it doesn't have that branding on it. That's just something to keep in mind. Again, different terminology on the types of publications. The good news is that when you self-archive, it is free, so it's cost effective, but there's often an embargo period associated with it. So that means that there is a period of time after your work has been published in the journal before it can be made publicly available. And of course, then we have closed access, which we're not going to talk about today. So let us now dive a little deeper into gold open access. Now, firstly, it is important to note that this is the preferred way of publishing open access by the Dutch government for publicly funded research. And the main reason for that is because then the publication is made immediately available. Recall that with green open access, there's often an embargo period. That's not the case with gold open access. Now, when I mentioned these article processing charges, it's good to know that on average, these charges run up to, or even more than 2,000 euros. So that's quite a lot. And because of this, it's extremely important that you as a researcher take open access and gold open access publishing into account in your workflow so that you can maybe perhaps make funds available for publishing open access through your research or project budget so you can plan for it. Now, here at the University Library, we are aware that these article processing charges can be a barrier to publishing gold open access. So the University Library, the university, has joined a number of national level deals with big publishers to buy out the article processing charges. Now, some of the publishers I've shown here on the screen. So we have Elsevier, Emerald, Springer, Oxford University Press, etc. And what this means is because the article processing charges have been bought out, researchers affiliated with the can publish for free or at a discount in over 11,000 journals that fall under these publisher agreements. And something to note is that it applies to corresponding authors only. So if you are an researcher, but you are a co-author on the paper that is not the corresponding author, even if you are the first author, this agreement won't apply to you. So a very practical tip is make sure that you are the author submitting your article in the publisher's portal, that you are the corresponding author, so that you can make use of this publisher agreement. Now, I'm sure at this point you're thinking, Ava, that's great, but 11,000 journals, how will I know whether my journal falls into one of these publisher agreements? Well, for that, we have the Erasmus Journal browser where you can look up exactly that information. So here is an example. This is what the Erasmus Journal browser looks like. The link will be shared with you either now in the chat or afterwards you'll have the slide. So here, as an example, I've looked up sociology. You see a number of journals pop up on the screen, and I wanted to give you an idea of how you can go about reading what you see. So let us look at the first journal on the screen, Social Issues and Policy Review. So on the right-hand side, you see that it says open request. It doesn't say open access. That means that it is a hybrid journal that supports open access publishing, but it is also a subscription journal. Underneath that, it says no APC discount. Now that part is pretty self-explanatory. It means that there is no article processing charges discount available to you. Now, if you look at the second journal on the screen, we see different information there. For Administrative Science Quarterly, on the right, again, we still see that it is a hybrid journal. We have the open request icon there. And underneath it says 100% APC discount for our authors. That is what you're looking for. That is also self-explanatory, but it is good news that you have a 100% discount when you would submit your article to be published gold open access in the journal. And the same holds for the Leadership Quarterly, which is number 3 on this list. Now, if you're looking specifically for journals that would be free of cost to you or have a discount, you can make use of the filters on the left. So this is a handy tool to be aware of. I have another practical tip for you while submitting if you want to make use of these publisher agreements. We have a number of useful pages on our open access portion of the University Library website. I encourage you to check out those pages. And one of those pages talks about the publisher's workflows. So you can actually see what steps you need to follow to make use of this discount. So here, for example, you see some of the steps listed under Oxford University Press. Now, while these steps might differ per publisher, one thing that does not differ is that each and every publisher requires you to use your email address when submitting. That is vital, not just for the publisher, but also for us to know that you are affiliated with the university. So please bear in mind to do so when you're submitting. Okay, so we've talked a lot about how you can go about making articles available gold open access. I wanted to tell you a little bit about what your options are for making books available gold open access. So we have, as of this year, introduced the Erasmus Open Access Fund for monographs. which will provide partial financing for book processing charges. Now, book processing charges tend to be higher than article processing charges. Article processing charges, as I mentioned, are about 2,000 euros on average. Book processing charges are about 9,000 euros on average, so quite a bit higher. But by applying to this fund, you can have up to 50% of the charges financed with a maximum of 10,000 euros. So that's a bit of help there. And if this sounds interesting to you, you can submit your inquiry to the fund after your work has undergone peer review, but before the publication process has started. Now I wanted to talk about green open access a little bit, because we have some interesting and exciting developments in the area of green open access at the university library, and at the university in general, of course. So let us remind ourselves that green open access is when you take a version of your work and you self-archive it, and there may be an embargo period associated with it. Now here, recently at the university, we have implemented the open access regulation, where if you have published your work closed access in a journal, your work can be made available 6 months after the publication date, open access via the institutional repository Pure. So the embargo period, because of the open access regulation, is then 6 months, and that is a nice time period. Okay, so because the institutional repository Pure is also relatively new, I wanted to show you what that looks like. What does it look like for your article to be made available green open access in the institutional repository Pure? So here is what an article in Pure looks like on the left, and on the right, you'll see some access to document options. Here you can see that this article is available open access. There's the orange open access icon there. And if you see license Taverna, that because the open access regulation is based on the Taverna amendment, then you know that this article has been made available via the open access regulation. Some practical things about the open access regulation. Firstly, you as a researcher do not need to take any action on your end for your work to be available open access under the open access regulation. The university library will take care of opening up any eligible publication. So we assume tacit agreement. However, if you would like to opt out for whatever reason, that is always an option. That is your right. And what is nice about the open access regulation is that it also applies retroactively to older eligible work. And finally, I wanted to say that it's really great to have you here because we do have an open access policy here at the university where all short scientific work has to be made available open access, either by publishing open access in a journal, gold open access, or by depositing your work in the institutional repository, green open access. And on that note, if there are any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Ava. Thanks so much. As you've mentioned, we've now reached the Q&A segment. I don't see any questions in the chat. Have I missed something? Then I will start off. I have a question. The open access team receives queries from researchers. What are some reservations people have expressed about publishing open access?
Yeah, well, that's an interesting question because, of course, there are a range of barriers that people have typically. So we mentioned the financial barriers. So we, of course, help researchers with what their options are there. But one type of question that we often get is this journal a predatory journal or not? Now, let me explain what a predatory journal is for those in the audience who may not be aware of that. So a predatory journal are journals that sort of abuse the open access model, charge article processing charges to publish in those journals, but in return, they don't provide the quality of service or high quality peer review, for instance, that you would expect from a proper journal that is not a predatory journal. Predatory journals are mostly interested in making profit off of this open access model. But the open access team very much helps researchers identify journals that could be predatory. We look into their requests or questions about a particular journal. So you can always contact us about that. We also in the team receive a lot of these type of questions from our faculty liaison librarians who then talk to the researchers and also get in touch with us. So together as a team in the library, we really work to help researchers identify the right journal to publish in.
Wonderful. Liz had a question about support from the open access library team. Liz, would you like to ask the question?
Yeah, thank you. I actually have two questions. So the first question was more on the level of, do the university supports Diamond Open Access?
We used to have a Diamond Open Access fund at some point, but that fund was underused. So I think it was an initiative that we started, and then there wasn't enough momentum for it to take off. So that is the extent to which we had supported Diamond Open Access. We also support a couple of Diamond Open Access infrastructures nationally or globally, but that's about it.
Yeah, because that was sort of my second question, which is already the same. I think you already answered, like if there was any support for running your own journal. So like as a researcher, if you want to run your own journal, so this is the fund you were mentioning, right? So then it doesn't exist anymore, or?
It was, this was before my time. So, well, but from what I understand that it was underused. So indeed, we had the fund and then people didn't make use of it. But, you know, support is a very broad word. So yeah. I know, for instance, we get questions from researchers who do run their own journals, and then we can advise them, for instance, on what they want to apply to the directory of open access journals to be listed there, then we can help them and guide them in that regard. So that is also support. So we try to do our best, and we're always expanding the level of our service broadly and also, you know, in detail.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Thanks. Do we have any more questions from the audience? Otherwise, we have a question that we've been asking throughout the campaign. And Eva, if you had to choose one open science practice that is necessary to ensure transparency in your field, what would it be?
Well, in this context, my field would be open access. So I'm going to say open access, just because, well, I have to give an answer. Why not that one?
Thank you. Well, and I think with that, it's a wrap. Thank you so much. Thanks for your time, everybody. I appreciate that you've made the time to be with us and take part in this. Tomorrow we close off the week with a fun open science escape room from 4 to 5 p.m. with prizes to win. There's still time to sign up. A link to the Research Transparency campaign page and the YouTube playlist of our previous session will be placed in the chat. Thank you all for your participation, and remember that you can always reach the open access team at the university library via the web pages and the team email address. Thank you all again, and wishing you a wonderful morning.